What is your website if you wanted to send somebody to your reel or?
Just williamsdp.com.
Okay.
Do you have any other job before you got a TV station job?
I worked at a lumber company. Right out of school, my very first job was teaching double system filmmaking at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, where I taught students who knew nothing about, didn't know how to load a camera or use a light meter or anything, tungsten, daylight, and taught double system filmmaking with a Nagra and clapboard and all that kind of stuff, and different kind of microphones. So that was my first job.
And how'd you get that job?
Somebody called. Literally
did you
just
have
graduated.
Experience to do that job?
No, but somebody. It's a longer story, but
Right.
This guy who was in. It's those weird little things. The professor teaching filmmaking was a guy who had a PhD in chemistry or something, and he once made a film hooking a 16 millimeter camera to a microscope to film amoebas. And so they said, "You're the guy. You've done some film, so you're it." And so he realized he was. He must have heard somebody referred him to me, I guess. And so I did a 6-month commitment and I worked with these students, and they had great equipment, but they didn't know how to use it. It was like brand new. It was a brand new college at the time. So I did that. I came back and worked for the PBS station. I was the chief cinematographer in sports. They were in between hiring a real person, and then I worked at night at that movie theater. So I managed, I booked films, I ran the theater. And in the TV world, a majority of the people, and I think this is still true, a majority of the people that graduate in film or broadcast don't get a job in the film broadcast. I think it's like 25%, maybe at the most. It's kind of people don't know that. But I was fortunate, I worked at the TV station. I ended up being very forceful, getting my first job, foot in the door, and it's always how do you get a job? You got to be at the right place, and so I worked in Boise, Idaho, from '77 to '80, and then got a job at KSL from '80 to '89, where we worked together shooting television news and then a news magazine, and got to fly around in a helicopter and do undercover stuff, and it was really cool. Right. You almost pay to do that. And then in '88, while I was still at KSL, we started our company, White Rabbit Productions. We saw a need to do, some corporate stuff. TV networks were starting to not fly everybody. The networks used to fly a producer, a camera, audio, and an on-camera talent at the last minute, rent 3 cars and stay for 3 days. I mean, it was an expensive proposition. And they started to not want to do that. It was an expensive thing. And they said, if we could just find somebody in the market that had their kind of the skill set and the right kind of equipment, we'll hire them. And then we can just send in a producer. And that's how we kind of also got our start. Yeah. And we've obviously had some ups and downs in that industry. We had to change the way we do things. We've seen the good side, the bad side. The reality is a lot of our competition, if it were even competition, a lot of people starting in the industry, and statistically, I don't know where it is, but it used to be something like 72% of every production company that started goes out of business within 3 years because they don't have a business plan. There's just a lot of TV production and/or video production companies that try to specialize in one thing or another, and they don't get the traction. I've seen people go out of school. They can't find a job. They form a partnership with someone else because how hard can it be? You get a camera, a tripod, a edit system, maybe a light. You do a couple of weddings, your uncle's corporate thing, and then people just don't show up because you have a camera that everyone wants. And those people tend to go out of business. And I used to buy their equipment after they'd gone out of business because they'd have a low mileage camera system or whatever else they had that they were just trying to. So anyway, that was my background. And I met you in television at KSL.
Well, and I just want to say something based on what you were saying about businesses and why you didn't bring up one important topic of that, connections. The reason you excelled is because you were already doing that for the networks. You just went out on your own to do it for the networks, but you already had a built-in base of clients and people and connections. So connections is
you're right. Networking.
connections is the issue.
Yeah.
In all businesses for sure, because it's it's a trust thing. It's a relationship thing. There's a lot of they call you because they like working with you and they know you're good and you get the job done and you come through because you have to deliver. Sometimes under extreme circumstances and difficult situations, right?
Yeah.
So,
and you do. In terms of delivering, you do have to deliver. If you don't deliver, if there's one time you don't deliver, they're going to go to somebody else.
Deliver. And so that's where it gets into how this business is different than other businesses, because there is such a pressure to deliver always that you end up doing whatever it takes. If that means staying up the night before to rebuild something, to fix something, to find out something, or do whatever you got to do, you show up at a level of commitment. I mean, I know there's other jobs that have that same level of commitment. I'm not saying there isn't, but it is not a skate through, today I don't feel like working so hard. So especially on longer term projects.
Well,
Just got to do a little water.
Yeah. When we come back, we've heard my history. Let's talk about yours and how it's you took a different path and more of the Hollywood. We've talked about this in the past where people graduate from college and they form this company, and one of them has to be a DP for some reason. So they say, you're the DP. You don't have much experience. You've only done some, but that's sort of this weird title that people give themselves.
Yeah. Well, I had no idea, even though I grew up in LA and had relatives around the film industry and had visited sets and TV sets and did different things when I was a kid through family members. But it all looked so big to me, so impossible, that I just never even considered, walk in a studio and see 100 lights, and I was like, well, what's that? I don't even get it.
You were like a teenager, or?
Oh, I was younger than that. Yeah, I was probably, early teen, maybe. Okay. But I after just not really being interested in anything else but photography, I did it in high school, did it after high school, and then I kind of started realizing that I had a couple of epiphanies working jobs that I realized, well, wow, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. So I went out and put a full search into LA, Orange County, looking for anything I could possibly find. And prior to this, let me just say, I had gone to a private still photography school in Hollywood, North Hollywood, called Artography, that's not there anymore. And I ended up graduating from that, and there I learned portraiture and lighting people and products and commercial photography, because it was designed to be a commercial photography, not anything to do with film or video. And so I put a big search on, went and interviewed a lot of things, a lot of places, and didn't get anything. About 6 months later, a guy from a photo lab in Anaheim calls me and says, you came in and I liked your attitude. Are you interested in coming and talking about this job? So it was processing film, and it was the main pro lab. They only dealt with professionals, and it was the main lab for Disneyland. So that's how I kind of, took off down that road, because I got something that was a real job, because my goal was, I'm going to look for any job that has anything to do with the industry of photography, whether it's delivering product,
So your goal initially wasn't to be a film movie. It was still photography.
No, it just seemed too big, too out of. And even though I loved movies, you know, I went to an original screening of How the West Was Won at the Cinerama Dome when I was probably 10. You know, I was always, I remember, you know, all these movies that we'd go to. So even though I loved them, it was just a process that I didn't see how to get there. It just seemed like
Yeah.
it
So
was
how do you go from
way,
being a
way-
still photographer to
Yeah.
film? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Well, so weirdly, a guy that I knew asked me when I was working at the lab because he knew I knew how to light people and things. So that I think is the important thing is I learned the skill of what 3/4 Rembrandt, loop lighting, all these different things. I knew how to light people. So he asked me to shoot something, so I did. And we kept doing it on the side to the point where then I finally quit this photo lab. And then he went off and did something else. And so the place that we were getting our projects edited, they hired me. And so I started working there and I started learning editing and a variety.
You're in your 20s now, or still?
Yeah, mid-20s.
Okay.
And also at that time, because I started shooting things with this other guy, I got the interest of, oh, okay, cinematography. So
You were shooting on film at this time?
nope,
Video?
nope, this was early video.
Okay.
But I decided I'm going to go back to school. So I went to UCLA Extension,
Ooh, hoity-toity. Mm.
you know, and it was night classes, so I could work during the day. And that is where it really changed for me because I had real working professors that were in the industry with a great knowledge, the UCLA Film Library,
That's important.
which is huge.
Yeah.
And so we saw a lot of films. We had, you know, big discussions about, you know, a lot of things that I had no idea about. And one of the light bulbs for me, the big ones, was production design. And I realized, oh, it's not just lighting people, it's what's in the background, what these props are, what stuff, anything. Everything has a meaning and a choice, you know. So that kind of excited me for some reason. And I thought, wow, that makes it more interesting. There's more to it than just that. So while I was also working at that company, and we were doing some commercials and small things in LA, a lot of corporate stuff, and documentary stuff for some networks back east that would need stuff shot out on the West Coast, some documentary type things. So a guy asked me one day if I would come and do his, he did a religious talk show at the Angelus Temple in Glendale. And the person that he had doing it before him, you know, he just was resistant to anything that this guy had for ideas, right? And so he asked me, he goes, well, what would you do? And I said, well, yeah, let's just do that. Now here, you got to imagine, and this dovetails into another conversation I know we're going to want to have, is learning new technology. So here I am, I know video, I know editing, I know lighting, you know, we'd already shot multitudes of things, but he wanted to take this talk show off the stage of that temple and go to an outdoor set in the Glendale Hills overlooking LA. I said, why not? Because these new things called HMIs had popped up.
Ah, yes.
I mean, they were around, but you know, it was out of our league. Big one, you know, 12K type thing, generator that level. And so I just researched and figured it out. I was like, well, so almost everything I've ever done, you have to take some kind of leap, but you build on what you have. Now, we didn't do that right away. We'd go in on a Friday and shoot, you know, 10 episodes. I mean, they just plow through these things, but I knew lighting, so I knew how to light people. Even though I didn't know the setup, I didn't know all these lights, I didn't know how to really do a stage setup or any of that thing, but all I did was concentrate on the people. Well, this person needs a key, this cross back keys, so when they're looking at each other. And that just led me into then when he wanted to shoot outside. It started, we got some HMIs. I backlit them to the sun, filled them in with the HMIs. It looked great. So it's situations like that move you forward and kind of gain that experience to do the next thing, because it is a ladder. It's a stepping stone.
Well, in terms of being a ladder, when did you start working in film?
Well, and so
I mean, it's similar, obviously, to it. But
mostly all my film experience was on stills. I had never shot. I mean, I shot surfing movies when I was 15 with my friends and I. So, yes, I was shooting some 8mm type stuff. But from that, I just kept parlaying things into the next thing as the next opportunity came along. Whereas, I think it's a little tougher now to gain that level of experience, because there's just such a big, easy jump to, I can start here, go get some gear, and be here, and not necessarily have all that. So doing all that stuff for several years, and then I decided, I wanted to get any experience I could with a camera in my hand every day, which led to news documentary. And I had some experience, and I had a reel that I cut based on some of those documentaries. So I got a job at a TV station where you and I met, and I just thought, I want to shoot every day, and that's the way to learn.
But your goal wasn't to be in television. It was
No.
your long-term goal was
No. And the other caveat to that, at UCLA, they said, you are not going to go out and get a job tomorrow. You can't get in the union. You got to have union hours to get in, and so how are you going to do that? So they recommended you have to go outside of your field, outside of the state, somewhere, and get this experience. So that's how.
UCLA told you to do that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, because again, they understood the process of what it took with experience.
That stepping stone thing.
Yeah, because that program dealt with mainly film, and so, you don't walk onto a film set and start shooting. You've got to have that experience, which.
So before you got to KSL TV, you had no film set experience, but you, when you got to KSL, you decided or had the opportunity to shoot film.
So what I equate that to is another jump. Yeah, I didn't have direct 35mm film experience, but I had some 16 and some 8mm. But again, knowing how to expose film, I learned the Ansel Adams zone system. So I was very confident about my film exposures and whatever. So film wasn't a daunting thing to me because I was doing it in still photography forever. I knew how to light people. So it was just a natural jump. It's like, oh, well, the film's wider. Okay. And I'm still looking through the lens. I'm still composing shots. I'm still lighting things. And, so it was all kind of the same. But you can see the difference is I wasn't just landing there. I had built all those levels of experience.
Well, how many years of experience did you have before you started shooting? Whereas today people jump out of school and they know everything because of YouTube and everything else. You had 5, 7 years, 8 of solid experience.
Probably 10, really.
Okay, so that's good. 10 years of experience, and before you are able to, jump into the film world and kind of become what you might call a DP at that point.
Yeah. Well, we had a boss at our station that was a film camera assistant himself, and he taught me the basics of camera assisting. As far as like how you do this, how you do that. Just organization.
But he'd been doing it for years.
But he'd been doing it for years, and he was very
good.
good.
A good mentor then.
Really good mentor. He came over to my house. I took notes. I recorded it on audio, because I was, going to enter into an area that he kind of encouraged, because he had started assisting on some jobs on the side and brought me along as a second. So I started learning how to be on a set.
So that's an important component, is to have a mentor or internship or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And as I was on all these sets as a camera assistant, I just made notes of everything, I looked at the lighting, I looked at,
Who does that?
Well, if if I just had this hunger for gaining knowledge and moving forward,
And
having
this is after 10 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I just had
You're still taking
I had
notes.
a drive
Yeah.
to excel at the next level, even though I never really had a full plan. Like, hey, this is exactly where I want to go. It could have ended up in documentary. It could have ended up in different places. But there were a couple of events that happened along the way that shifted that. And, so having that experience, moving up, shooting as a first, I got a job on a movie where I was the second unit, first AC. But the producer who was going to direct that second unit asked me, he goes, but can you shoot if necessary? And I said, yeah, oh yes, because I could. I mean, I had all the experience I needed. Well, he goes, well, here's the bottom line. We know we're going to change DPs about 2 weeks in because they came from Europe. They were kind of made by the US distributor to use an American cinematographer. They wanted to use their own person that they'd brought, but the studio wouldn't let them. So, they were going to go in and start and then see if they could finagle the switch. So one night on set, we were starting late. It was a night scene, and it was with Kiefer Sutherland and Meg Ryan, and it was the shootout scene on the at a 7-Eleven or something store, and it was just delayed and delayed and delayed. Well, they finally came out and said, okay, here's the deal. We have shifted. We have now a new DP, and we have now a new second unit DP, and we're going to be on 2 cameras tonight. We're going to finish shooting. We're going to shoot this shootout scene from the inside of the store where they come out, and then they have this kind of interaction with the police.
This is a 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was it. One night. I mean, whammo, I'm in.
And you're not union or anything.
Nope. But yeah, it was a heady moment for sure. But I had way more experience, leading up to that. Even though I hadn't actually done that, I composed and looked. I knew how to frame. I knew how to do everything. So again, it was just a larger, format. It just didn't really, impact it. So we did that, and then I went on for the next 3 months. We shot all the driving and the visuals and interactions and cars and everything. And it was a very active second unit. It was full time. Had our own truck and everything. So, so that was the kickoff. Then all of a sudden, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah, okay.
That's where it shifted when I saw what it was about and I experienced it on a level, and it was successful. As far as
So the networking at that point was also important in terms of getting your next
Yeah.
job and the next job?
Yep. Well, and that helped in the local market where, as a camera assistant, I'd worked with all these people. So now that I started shooting, again, I had all those connections.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't against anybody else, but I just came out and let people know that now I'm, doing this. So I started getting hired for commercials and for different types of things. And again, I had done a lot of product photography, so I knew how to light a lot of different things.
Well, give me the shopping list of what commercials, who have you shot for, and what are the other big projects you've done? I mean,
Well, over time, it built up from local to national stuff in different ways. But everything from some auto, Ford and True Green Lawn Care, and I should have prepared for this because
I know,
I'm trying to remember all those.
It's difficult.
All those different.
But you've done some series and some,
Well, and again, that came along through connections. Somebody came along in early '90s and said they wanted to interview me for a job on a feature film, and again, I had a lot of second unit stuff, a lot of being around it. I had been a camera assistant on TV movies of the week, TV shows like that. So I just, although I did my job, I just made notes Like, wow, that's how. Oh, that's what he's doing for this night. And then I'd see the end result, and I go, I don't really like that so much. It's too dark. It's too contrasty. And then I'd see somebody else's work, write it all down, and I go, oh, that I like, And I'd see, oh, that's what filter we're using. Oh, that's what we're doing. So it was a way of learning on the job, in a sense, and then I would just find what I liked, and then I'd create my own version of it.
But you've done not only 35, you've done large format, a number of them, and you've worked on like Touched by an Angel and Promised Land and Disney things, and all from those humble beginnings.
Yeah, I mean, just parlaying again. Everything led to another. So I'd shot 3 or 4 feature films in the mid '90s, and a project came along with one of the directors that I had done, I think, only one film with by that point. But he got a job to shoot this IMAX movie for Hearst Castle in California. And he said, man, I'd really love for you to do it with me. And he had never really done it either.
This is a huge deal. The IMAX is deal. Like
and we were fairly not nervous about it, but we were
I'd be nervous.
Yeah, I mean, but we were confident because, again, what was I doing? I was just widening
bigger.
Up that format.
Yeah, but still, that's
I know. Well, and there are a lot of particulars to when you're shooting big, large format, but that are different. But so we had conversations with the producers. I wrote a personal letter saying, "Look, I grew up in California. This is true. I was really into Hearst Castle and that whole early '30s movie legacy thing. All the stars were up there. Hearst himself, Citizen Kane, which of course we saw in
that's heady
school.
Stuff, yeah.
And so I really wanted this job. I mean, I really did. So I wrote this impassioned letter about why I was the perfect person.
Although you'd never, ever
Although I'd never done that. But I said, it's all, and it's still true. It's all about lighting, really, and framing and knowing what you're doing on those levels. Now, I can go learn, that camera. So what we did is we set off on a tour. We went to, I forget where we went. We went to Montreal, I think, and we went to New York, and we went to several places because IMAX theaters were not that,
not that prevalent
at the time, back in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
So, and we went and watched all these movies, learned and figured out. And we were told all these things you can and can't do. You can't pan too quickly, strobing, all these different things. So, we figured all that out. We learned all the technical stuff because that's my pitch to them. That's the movie making part, the lighting, knowing how to tell a story. That part is different than a mechanical thing. I may not have a new iPad here that I haven't used before, but I know the concept and I can figure out the few technical differences in this version versus the other version, and that's really all it was. But again, I had this enormous background of skills and experiences that I wasn't walking into something as a novice. I was walking in as, I'm going to change tools.
Right.
I'm not going to relearn this job.
I have 2 questions. So why did they use you as opposed to someone else? And what would you tell the next generation that they need to do to get their next job, knowing that this is a... Why did they use you?
This is the connection thing again, because that director wanted me. And directors have a lot of sway. They can have somebody that they...
Was there a kickback or something going on here?
No. We had just worked a lot together, and we were comfortable. We knew each other's style, and he knew my abilities. And so he wanted, because he was embarking on something new, he wanted that part of the job. He wanted that comfort factor of me being there. And again, I had gone to great lengths to explain to everybody, we're just widening this format that's running through the camera. We're not...
But you're also kind of a team player. I mean, it's a film production is like a family of people that all have to kind of get together.
Yeah. But again, that's what the benefit of being on big sets. This is the thing you and I've talked about a lot, that unfortunately people miss these days. The first jobs you have, if you can be on big sets, you learn about all the different departments, all the way that whole machinery works, how it all works together. You get to witness how they do blocking and lighting and setups, and get through the day and what all the procedures are, because it's fairly complicated in the sense of what you need to know to get through that, figure out how to get through that day. And so again, you just can't go cold into that. You have to have that as some experience in that. So that's how I think the best way to do it is, I mean, not only is it, again, a connection, but you really need to have that on-set experience, because it's easier to shoot smaller. It's a lot harder, and the stakes are higher, and this may be your only shot. If you have to go from only a small experience and now the door opens and you get that one shot to shoot that movie, you better be ready. You really better be ready. You don't want to blow that. So, but by being on big sets, those things weren't daunting to me, overwhelming. I just focused on my job. I knew what the departments did. I knew how to work with production designers. I already knew the whole routine of making a film. It was just using a wider format. And that simplified it a lot. And once we started getting dailies back and knew, because I'd done this on 35 millimeter so many times, I wasn't concerned about, I knew what printing lights were. I mean, I knew how to do the whole lab thing.
I mean, people might not know what a daily is in this new world.
Yeah. Well, and when you're shooting on film, you're shooting negative, and that's all that happens in movies.
And you don't have a big monitor to look at. In the earlier days, you had you didn't know what it looked like until you got a daily, which was a print of your original, so that you could at least see. And it wasn't necessarily color corrected or anything.
No, it was kind of they call them a one light daily. And you would get your printer lights, which would tell you that your exposures were okay. And
but that's kind of daunting in itself, where you're shooting something and you're pretty sure you got it, but man, you know.
Well, just imagine going through all these elaborate setups all day long, shooting all that film. I mean, but see, I'd been doing that on commercials for several years, many years by that time. So we would go into a transfer facility. They'd put the 35 film up, and we would transfer straight to video, to tape, and color correct as you go and whatever. So I had a lot, shooting commercials was a big advantage, because I got to sit there in the transfer and watch it on a screen and figure out, oh, okay, that worked better than this with, maybe there's not enough of this, or some change in the lighting, or whatever. And, sure, there was manipulation you could do in post, bring up the shadows or change this or do that. But, film's a different animal in the way that you light for the shadows more than digital, and everything is exposing for highlights and working the other direction. So,
well, I always found shooting film was, again, you don't get to see it until it comes out of the soup, and it's
and I had many sleepless nights, in certain respects, only on projects or things that were even further out of like an experience, like, oh, I wonder if that high speed shot did enough, because we shot a commercial, once, and shot 750 frames a second, or
which you'd never probably done before, but you
35.
did the calculations or whatever, and it should have worked out.
Yeah. And but again, I had a lot of product stuff I'd done before. I did a lot of products and ski industry stuff, and we had to shoot a binding release, and I think we shot that at 1,000 frames a second or something. So I'd been there before. I knew all about, again, if you know the basics of your exposures and lighting and everything, you're just doing calculations. I mean, the one, hard part is I understand people like digital in the way that you can see on the screen. And yeah, there is a comfort to that. But I was never that overly intimidated. I mean, even Roger Deakins said, "Oh, it's great now. I just don't have to go home and worry anymore about what happened or whatever." But that struck me, and I mean, he's great. I'm not disparaging that in any way, but
Any other names you want to drop?
no, but I mean, but I thought to myself, if you know your job and the exposures, you're generally pretty okay unless
Yeah.
something catastrophic happens in the lab or things you can't control anyway, you know? I mean, I've had a few of those where there was some processing issue or something, but so yeah, I think the story here is that a lot of time apprenticing, which we don't do anymore,
Yes.
building from one job to the next over a period of time, so that by the time, because when I got those opportunities, I had to have that confidence. You know, I had to sell myself to go get those jobs, and then I had to, you know, deliver. And those are the key components, because you don't deliver on that feature film, you know, moment
Yeah.
that you get handed to you to say, here's your shot. You know, it can be over for some people.
So my experience on a movie set has more the BTS, the behind the scenes, or EPK, electronic press kit, where we did work with the Disney crew and the High School Musical and Hallmark. So it's a very fortunate situation in the sense that we get to work with all of the departments. And normally in the segmented filmmaking world, you don't, as a PA, or you don't go talking to the director necessarily unless you absolutely have to. Where we are able to kind of observe, take notes as it were, and see how, why are they shooting at 4,300 degrees and adding or subtracting, and just the whole, directors. It was a very unique opportunity that that we still get to do, but our company is still, more of a broadcast production kind of thing. Well, let's talk about some of the technologies that we have seen in our histories, how they've changed, and what stare into the crystal ball to see what the future is going to bring. So, we both started in film because that's what they had. We transitioned into, the early video cameras. Some of them, mine was the TK-76 Model C, which had a camera and a deck and a battery belt that ended up weighing from 58 to 70 pounds. And then if you had a headlight, that was, even more. If you carried a case of lights, which you rarely did, or the tripod, yes, exactly. Which is why people in our generation have had back, shoulder, hip, and knee surgeries. And then we got lighter weight cameras that were one piece, the beta cams, which lasted for a really long time. That's behind us is one of them. It's standard def. The cameras were $60,000 and more, and then we transferred from analog tape to digital tape. The cameras got a little bit smaller, not much, and then there was a flurry of changes into different kind of cards. So we finally became all digital, which is where we are today. And in the meantime, we always tried to capture, especially in the film world, but also in the commercial world, the film look. And we jumped through a lot of hoops. We had that system where you put spinning mirror on a thing, and it was kind of a crazy time. To where I think today we're pretty much in the, we've got the film thing worked out. We used to have to take stuff and process it and give it a film look, which would had pull downs and all kinds of crazy things. So people, the newer people haven't experienced any of that. This is like, the easy time.
Yeah, none of the stuff that well, again, I think it's just good for us that we have that experience of going through all those generations, because it was early, right around 2000, or I don't know, maybe 90.
Which is 24 years ago.
Yeah, where, you start, I mean, that was the big mini DV craze. Everybody was shooting on mini DV and then transferring to film, and, there were a couple, Spike Lee did a movie and several others, experimenting with this, new lighter weight camera, situation.
Yeah, and at one point we did have our video camera, and we tried to get it tweaked to look more cinematic. And there's a project that we worked on for the Department of Workforce Services here in Utah, where it was the script was a Mission Impossible kind of script, and we were trying to do. We didn't try. We did this film noir kind of hard lighting, and I think we had some smoke and whatnot. And it was kind of the tail end of is film viable or not. So what we did was we got a 400-foot roll of 16 millimeter, and we double shot it. We shot it on film, and then we introduced the camera, the video camera, to see how much of a difference there was. And it was kind of, it has grain, and it has, it did have a funky, it helped. The end product that we did use was the film version. But there were still improvements being made on the video and or the cost of renting a film camera and a crew and processing and transferring. It just wasn't worth it anymore. So we kind of kissed that goodbye.
And what year was that?
I think it was 1999 or 2000.
So the other element that was missing at that time was the motion blur of 24p.
Yes, yeah.
Still trying to replicate the film look on top of 30p was really hard. Go back, I just went, because Curb Your Enthusiasm's ending this year on HBO, I just went back to season 1, which was the year 2000.
Oh, what did they shoot that on, do you think?
Well, it definitely wasn't, they didn't have, remember, I think
they weren't shooting film?
2001 or 2000, no,
oh.
no, it was shot on tape. But I think, I don't remember when Lucas first shot that Star Wars
on the F8,
on the
F900,
F900. I can't remember
which was a 2/3 inch chip.
It might have been 2001 or something
They
like
used
that.
a panavized version or something of it.
No, I just read about it. It could have been.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but whatever they did, that was the first kind of leap into it. And
Yeah.
those cameras were $80,000-$90,000,
Right.
those F900s. And
But it was a small little chip.
yeah, 2/3 inch chip.
Yeah.
So then you had the depth of field issue
Right.
on top of it. So we know that there's texture, there's motion, there's movement in a film gate, there's grain that changes and moves every frame. So digital being locked down and the pixels are locked down, and we didn't have 24p and everything. It was really hard to compare any kind of tape to make a film look, even though we tried.
Well, so if that does in fact bring us up to today, you had that experience recently where you saw how many cameras all compared, all the new cameras, and so this is we're talking January 2024. So it's the first quarter, and where are we today? Did you find?
Well, we're at a place now, in my opinion, where there's parity. I mean, there's not one camera really excelling.
Oh no, the one no Aries got to be or red. It's
even though I own an Arri.
Yes.
I mean, we all have our personal favorites, And sometimes
Sony, I'm into Sony right now. But
right, but that's mainly because your clientele or whatever is dictating. If they wanted to use, Canon or Panasonic or whatever, then you'd go that route. I mean, I guess so last June I went to the Academy Theater in Hollywood. I went to the HBO camera test. They do it every 2 or 3 years, and they spend a lot of money. It's a very valuable service that this provides, because you never get to sit in a theater with a calibrated projector and a screen and look at every camera
critically and
and they're all shot. They light a scene and then they set.
Which cameras?
I mean, the Alexa Mini was the kind of standard camera that everything was based on. There were a couple of
the 4K.
No, the Alexa Mini is the predecessor to 4K imager. So, but the Alexa Mini is still using it on Yellowstone. I mean, still to this day. So even though it's a less than 4K, it's like 32, 3.2K.
No, I thought 4K was like the new standard. You have to have
Yeah.
4 or 6 or 8 now.
Well,
I know that's a separate
yeah,
that's a separate
that's,
conversation.
yeah, that's a
So-
whole other rabbit hole.
So it was airy.
Rabbit.
Yes, white rabbit.
Yeah.
Airy. What a red.
Well, so there were 2 reds, two the Sony Venice, 2. I think there was only 1 Sony. There were then the new Alexa 35. They shot film also, 35 film. So
no black magic.
yeah,
They don't count.
No. I think they did do a black
Okay.
magic, but they, yeah. I'm trying to remember everything, but no Panasonic Vericam. I don't think this round. I think in last rounds there was that in there, and last round there was also Canon in there, which wasn't in there this year.
Okay.
Which I know a couple of the people involved, and I just asked about that, and it was kind of inconclusive why. It wasn't because of standards or quality or anything. It was just based on the manufacturers and their.
I think they're prejudiced against those cannons. I don't know.
There is some of that.
But you own a couple.
Yeah, which I mean, I also own Alexa, so Alexa 35 now. I had a Mini, and then I moved up to the 35.
Who was the winner?
In terms of dynamic range, the Alexa 35 was the clear winner. It was the
In
only.
your mind or in the
No, in
collective
everybody's mind.
mind?
There were
Okay.
gasps in the audience because there's a scene, they shoot a safe cracker in this little dark room, right? And he's cracking a safe and he puts a little, explosive on there and it sparkles and lights up and then he hears somebody coming. So he leaves and he goes out on this rooftop, which is pitch black. So they start on a dolly shot, pitch black, dolly all the way across this roof as the guard has come out with a flashlight and is hiding behind some air conditioning unit or something. He walks all the way over and across in front of this billboard, which is up on top of the building, which is lit up like a billboard at night, very bright. It was the only camera that handled that entire range where when he got in front of that billboard, it wasn't so blown out because, we would do a stop pull in real life, or we would change the exposure, or you would build up the foreground scene or do whatever. But this was trying to show the basic raw, hardcore, dark to bright, and all the cameras, it was just very overexposed and wouldn't be something you would present at the final image. And even the Alexa would have needed some adjustment, but it was far better holding it with no stop change.
But other than those extremes, how did all of the other cameras compare?
And the red, I got to say, one of the reds, I don't remember which exact model number it was because
you don't like reds.
I appreciate red because it's just that I don't use it. I've used them a couple of times and they're fine. It's just a difference in, like anything. Like I don't really do too much with the Sony, but I like, the Venice. I think it's a great camera. And there's great stuff shot on all of them. I've seen movies shot on red that look great. I've seen movies shot on Sony that look great. Airy, everything. So
is there a parity now, do you think, in the terms of?
Yeah, I mean, these
were pretty close to.
These were extreme. So they also did a shoot in Australia. They went to Australia to shoot a moonlight scene because Australia had, traditionally had an environment that they knew they could probably take the risk of spending that money and going to there to get some results. So generally, not a lot of cloud cover, not a lot of city light. So they found, because they wanted pure moonlight, like full moon moonlight, and without a lot of smog or a lot of, you couldn't do it in certain
Can
bigger
you shoot
cities.
in moonlight?
Well, they did.
They
did.
That's
It's pretty amazing.
Blows me away.
So there was a shot on a boat, a couple of guys standing there holding a phone. The only thing lighting their faces was the phone. Was the ambient light off of the phone, not projecting a light.
Was it like 12,000 ISO or something?
No, they couldn't change the ISOs. Remember?
Oh yeah. Wow.
So all ISOs had to be the same through every setup.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it was quite remarkable.
I mean, the early film stocks we used were, had a ASA of 50, or if we were lucky, or 16 or something.
But they kind of just wanted to see the base sensor
right.
all across the board. That's the most radical, right? Moonlight.
Yeah.
You're never going to shoot generally with moonlight first. You can't plan for it. It doesn't last that long. A cloud comes in, you're done. And it doesn't really even look that great. Yeah. It was interesting, but you know, it wasn't crafted. It was just what it was. But I just want to say, one of the Reds, and I'm sorry to the Red people, that I don't know the model number. No, I am. I mean, because they deserve it. But it was one of the better looking ones in the extreme low light. And I mean, I'm sure it was the Raptor. I don't know if it's the newer XL or whatever, but I mean, that's the one issue to me with Red is there's so many models. I just have a hard time keeping track.
But in the film commercial world, we've talked about this before, there have either been none or very few Red cameras used for the production of major motion picture films.
Yeah.
Maybe as a second or third unit or something, but for the most part, Arri still is or film is still kind of the preferred.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I started shooting this historical drama in the early teens of this 20-teen era, I, you know, wanted to shoot. Alexa wasn't out yet. Arri had called a D21 predecessor camera. It was a 2K camera with a big codex on board, you know, crazy recorder and everything. It was still in the infancy of that, you know, recording raw at the, you know, first days of that level. I mean, and here's the other thing where I give Red a lot of credit. Whatever it was, 2006 or 7, whenever they came out with the Red 1, they're really responsible for jump-starting, getting everybody excited about 4K and shooting raw and doing all these varieties of things, right? So they really, that's their place in history. They kind of, you know, because everybody else was still fumbling around with 2/3-inch sensors and whatever, and they pop up with this full-frame sensor, Super 35, raw, and you know, it was pretty magical. I mean,
let's talk briefly about the, you know, we've gone from the, you know, the 2/3 to the Super 35 to the, you know, full frame now, and full frame was supposed to be the ultimate all-knowing, all-seeing, but are we finding it's going back to a Super 35? The last camera you bought that you spent $198 on is a Super 35. Why wasn't it a full frame?
Yeah, well, mainly in the world that I work in now, which is generally TV series work, the need for a large format sensor isn't as necessary as the feature world. You know, in a feature world, like I just saw that new Willy Wonka movie because I wanted to see what these lenses and this large. So they shot on the Mini LF, which was a large format sensor, and then they did anamorphic. They did Cooke anamorphic lenses on top of it. And it's really that's something I would do if doing a feature on a widescreen that's going to show in a theater. That makes sense. On a TV, on a 65, 75-inch screen, I mean, minis still look as good as anything out there. That's the crime of this. And here's a little story that will highlight this issue. So in
It better be good.
Maybe. Not 19. In 2008, I shot a movie for the High School Musical producers called American Mall. It was for MTV. It was shot on 35. And then I took off right afterwards to do the IMAX movie that I did in Morocco, the Islamic traveler story in Morocco. So I didn't get to do the post or the color on the American Mall movie. So as I was getting back, it was a couple of weeks till the premiere. So we went actually to the Cinerama Dome to like a Friday morning. It was going to be that Friday night. And they go, well, let's just look at this, you know, and we're going to bring it, they're playing it back on HD Cam SR, which was still
one of those formats,
but still 1080.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It wasn't, it's all, it was tape. It was 1080. So I was nervous, you know, not only I had to not done the color, which was disconcerting, but, you know, I'm like, we're in the Cinerama Dome and we're projecting, playing back off of a HD Cam SR deck in 1080. I was like, boy, this is going to be bad. So I was glad I was there. So two things came out of that. One, I heard the producer say, I wish we would have let him do the timing and waited. All they had to do was wait like 2 weeks, and I would have been home and I could have done it. But somebody didn't want to wait. And
timing in film or is a color correcting.
Color. Yeah. And the other thing was literally how good that 1080 projection looked. So here we're in theaters, you know, I
With
remember
an
when the first
anamorphic.
two, I remember when the first 2K projectors came out, and then 4K and all that, and we've really gotten advanced in this day, but I was just shocked at like how okay that looked on a big screen. Now, of course, it wasn't the full, Cinerama Dome complete widescreen. It was just your, 16:9 framing because it was meant for TV, not theatrical. But they, wanted to hold the premiere in a nice venue, and so that taught me something right there. It's like, wait a minute, if we're projecting 1080 in a big theater, okay, how's that work? I mean, so it gave me, again, another experience for more confidence to not worry about this 4K, 8K, 6, whatever. I understand it. I understand why David Fincher likes to shoot 6 and 8K, and then they do a lot of reframing, and they do a lot of effects, and they have all that area to work with. And that's a style, and there's a reason for it. And okay, that makes sense, Not everybody needs to do it that way or wants to, so does it matter? Again, the Alexa Mini at, I think it's 3200, 3.2K, looks as good as any, in other words, it's not generally this gigantic jump to a better look and quality. In fact, in some cases, it can be, too much information, too sharp, too So that's why I kind of, on this last Apple TV show I did, I wanted to shoot the Alexa Mini. It's called Amber Brown. It was last year, 2023.
Because you own the camera.
No, not because I own the camera. Just because that was my camera of choice. I'd done High School Musical on the Mini. I'd done Andy Mack for Disney on the Mini. I did this pilot for Disney on the Mini. So no, it was my tool. I knew it the best. I felt I always knew what I could expect out of the highlights and windows, and I didn't have to worry about these things. And I knew what low light did. And it was just a great performer all around. Small, easy to work with. So I loved that camera. And regrettably, I sold it only to raise the money to buy the new expensive Alexa 35.
When we talk about cameras, people are always asking, what camera should I buy?
Yeah.
And so for maybe our audience, that's kind of, it's almost the wrong question. It's like, what do you want to use it for?
Yeah.
And sometimes people say, well, if you're really serious, you need to get an Airy. Well, I mean, people are just starting, and it might be their first camera. They're just trying to figure out what's the best system.
Well, here, we overlooked one thing about that HBO test. In the end, everything looked great.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there might be subtle differences. Now, they shot a scene where they started outside with a guy delivering pizza out of a car, Steadicam, came to the front door, came in the foyer of the house, walked through the dining room, through the kitchen.
All these lighting conditions and whatnot.
And they had it specifically lit, fluorescent in the kitchen, different lighting combos.
Oh, okay.
And so somebody, set it up to where the exposure was correct for that ISO. And they, every camera, like I said, had to do the same ISO, same exposure. No pulling a stop or anything. So, and you would see subtle differences. You'd see the Sony react different inside the kitchen with the fluorescent. You'd see the red or the Airy.
Right.
Everybody, there were little subtle differences.
Okay.
Nothing that's not changeable. In the sense of like, I mean, if you were looking for something, this is what always gets me in reviews and different things. People say, "Oh, the Sony has a little green, bias," or the Canon has this warmth or whatever. All that stuff's fixable. I mean, changeable.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's so subtle that it's not a reason to make a camera decision on. It's a lot of variety of things. I mean, my other camera, that I use for work we do together, and I shoot stuff for you. A Canon C500 Mark II. It's a full frame camera. It's whatever. It's $15,000-$20,000, but Canon's always been known for the warmth and the color, nice color, and and it's a very robust camera. It has a lot of good things. I can change the mount to PL mount or EF mount for different lenses, and there's a lot of adaptability to it. And so I think in the camera choosing, it's gotten really hard. I don't know that I could recommend that, oh, here's the clear winner. I mean, my clear winner is the Alexa 35, but it's 80 grand. So it's not for everybody. And it doesn't fit all applications. Doesn't make any sense to shoot a corporate video. I mean, unless you own it already. But it's not the camera to go buy.
Well, in our world of broadcast, television and cameras, we went through this. The camera of choice, the Rolls Royce, used to be this Ikegami, which doesn't even equate to. Yeah, it used to be the camera of choice.
It had a look, though.
It had a look, and it was warm.
Yeah.
And the other one was like a Sony, and there's really, Panasonic played around for a little bit. They're totally gone now. And then Canon came on. So in the broadcast run and gun, it's still going to be something like a Sony or maybe a Canon, and in the lower.
And Red's got some,
Red has
Komodo
some as well.
models that are good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good. That's the thing. Really, I'd focus less on the cameras, and I'd look more to lighting skills, framing, storytelling, do all that stuff. Pretty much any of these cameras. And the other thing is, it's like this shoot we're talking about next week. First thing I ask is, can I use my Canon as opposed to your Sony?
Yeah.
Not because there's any better or worse, because they both create nice stuff. I know the Canon inside and out. It's something I use all the time. So use the tool you're familiar with. If I had to go work with your camera, I would do it, but I'd have to take it home for 2 days and I'd shoot some stuff and test it.
That's the other good thing about some of the clients. They'll say, we want the FX9 or similar, and they know that. Sometimes they don't even know what the difference is. They just want a professional broadcast quality camera, and obviously the people that know how to operate it. Some of the newer decisions that we made that might have dissuaded us from going with a newer Canon system is many times now people do want off speed. They do want 60. We can do 120, or I think maybe even more. Whereas the Canon, for a while, didn't offer that. But those were, how often do you do that?
Right.
So it wasn't as important.
Well, I had done a TV show from about 5 years on and off, partial year, called American Ride, that was shot all over the country, and we used C300s.
But before that, when you first started, what did you use?
What was that?
EX3s.
EX3s, the Sony EX3.
Right, that was a little half-inch chip, but even that was...
and that was fine. I mean, it worked just fine, So again, it's not a, I got to have this or that.
Right.
But at some point when we were doing, we did 10 seasons of that travel show and all, history travel show. So mostly back east and, where everything kind of happened. But literally all over the country, all out west and everything. Even went to France to do World War I and went to Hawaii for World War II. So we got around. But, we needed 2 cameras. And so at some point we were shooting, consistently enough. We just decided to buy, Canons, two of the C300s, the 1080 versions, not the newest, or the Mark IIs, the 4K versions.
Yeah. And I think in the end, we both understand that cameras are a tool.
Yeah.
And you use the tool that you have.
Yeah.
Even if it's an older tool, they're still good. They have a.
But you got to know that tool. Like. Yeah. I don't want to go. I mean, look, there's nothing inherently.
Don't you touch that? That's mine.
Nothing inherently difficult about that Sony, except I would just fumble around with the menus, and it's like, oh, that, and then, oh, what's the better setting for this, and what ISO works better. I don't know any of that.
That's the other thing that's really changed in terms of camera technology. Is it used to be back in our day of video, you turned it on. You didn't have 24. You color. You did the white balance. Maybe you did a black balance, and that's it. There were no other parameters. Where now it's gotten obviously very complicated, and you have to be much more technical.
Yeah, for sure. But again, you have to know your instrument. It's just like you don't go play a piano. You got to know your instrument. You got to be versed at it and well practiced, so that when you come up against something on a shoot, you don't want to be fumbling around with it. But that's the only thing I look at the camera differences are. The Sony might display this little bias variation versus the other. They're all like, even the colorists and the people that I know, they can blend those different cameras even together. It's not that difficult anymore. So, because even on Andy Mac, which was shot on Alexa, we used my first C500, not the Mark II, but the first one, as the Steadicam camera, because I owned it. And I had a set of Canon prime lenses, and so it just made sense, because they didn't want to pay that much more for it. But I said, all right, it wasn't even me pushing my camera. It was just like, all right, well, I'll give you a deal on mine, but I wanted a full-time Steadicam setup. And they wouldn't give us 3 bodies to have the 2 cameras always on dollies, and then a built Steadicam sitting off to the side ready to go. That means a full, body extra, rental. So I said, well, let's just use my C500. Is it exactly the same as an Alexa? No, but it worked. They were able to deal with it. So, and that was 2016, 2017 era. So now with the C500 Mark II, it's got it's a different sensor. It's even better. It's got, so they're all moving to a level where and that's the other part of that HBO screening. After a while, when you're watching this whole clip, you can't even remember. You're watching, okay, here's the Sony going through this house. Here's the Alexa going through, here's the red. It's like, I don't know, they all looked great. I mean, out of subtle differences.
Whereas like a year ago, there were more, it's getting, the bar is higher, basically, for everybody.
But if you're sitting there, and if you did a blind test with somebody, I guarantee you couldn't figure out which camera was which. And so what's that kind of tell you? You're at a point where, and which is good, we're finally getting all this technical stuff out of the way. Everybody's, kind of super excited about lenses. So now you can get any kind of vintage lens, all these different varieties. We're reaching parity in a level where maybe now it kind of goes away from the technology and back to the filmmaking, the storytelling,
Well, let's change gears and let's talk about technology, because obviously it is changing, and it's going literally from using cameras to not using cameras to this AI. And again, this is we're talking April of 2024. So today what we know, we're just scratching the surface. We've seen some of the tremendous changes from like a year ago, from 6 months ago, from 3 months ago. What's your AI created crystal ball say about, in your industry of filmmaking? We just heard that Tyler Perry, who was going to spend $800 million on building 12 sound stages, is not. What is that? You watch a lot of YouTubes and other things. What's your take?
Well, but I watch all the every movie. I go to the theater to see the movies. That's what I prefer to do, even though I've got a 65-inch screen in my room to watch, family room to watch movies. And they all look great, streaming mostly. Sometimes there's a little bit of variation on a couple of them. But
in the new technological world, Matthew, what do you see?
It's a tough one. I wouldn't want to be a prognosticator at this point, because...
No, I'm asking you. Prognosticate.
Well, gonna be the groundhog that might not come out of the hole for a while. I mean, sure, there's definite, advantages. My whole thing is, as long as it's can match what we do in reality, and if it saves time and money. I mean, this film that I'm doing in the fall, there is some car work, and we all know that insert car with trailer and lighting and doing everything is very time consuming, very difficult. And sure, if you can do some night driving sequences on a stage with a volume, it's going to save you from getting out there in the street, worrying about all these different varieties of things, blocking roads, doing different things, lighting. So practicality wise, it's to me a practical tool. It's not an answer to whatever, because there's already a move on where even I've seen advertisements for certain movies, I don't even remember which, because I would mention it if I could, is, hey, this is kind of less CGI than it used to be or whatever, because I think we got into, so much of that in a lot of movies that there's still a unreality to it, even though there's a joke, because Unreality Engine's one of the big players in all that world. But, there is something missing a little bit with it. And I'm just always in favor of, and there's many directors, Taylor Sheridan on Yellowstone and all, I want to do it all in camera person. I don't want the artificial level.
But he's doing Western-y more things.
Sure, yeah. And of course, everybody needs a green screen now and then. They're a tool. If you're doing a specialty shot or a type of thing, there's always a need for all that stuff. The volume is just another tool, and it will progress. It will get better. That's the good news. And we know technology doesn't stand still, and it's literally drives everything that happens in a certain world. Look at sound came along and changed the world in film. It's never going to stand still. So I'm not against it or whatever. I just want it to be. I want my picture that I spend a lot of time and energy making to be realistic. That's really my thing about it, is if I can do it and use a volume and cheat the thing, because filmmaking is cheating every day. Right. Not real people in that room with this thing. It's not a real situation.
I'm surprised. I'm aghast.
And we're stopping and starting and filming conversations from multiple or scenes, and so it's constructed to begin with. So it's another construction, but I just want to see it used properly. And I just saw Dune 2, and gosh, it's just getting better and better. It's just and those are fantastical backgrounds, and so there's no other way you could do some of that stuff. Right. It would be impossible to create that imagery, and that's the great part of it. But that's a different type of movie and a tool for that type of project versus the smaller thing. I mean, we could be in front of a volume right here, I guess, but the cost
aren't we?
Yeah, the cost of it for this level of thing would be too much, right? So but for Dune, it's not, and so anyway, or Mandalorian used it extensively.
Well,
but I got to say about Mandalorian, it's a known fact that they did a lot of fixing afterwards. There was a lot of,
mistakes were made, or
just things that they needed to go back and replace, and did a lot of rotoscoping and a lot of fixing and things, and so again, they're testing the technology. They're a pioneer. They're going out there and trying this technology that isn't 100%, just like now we are with the cameras. We've kind of gotten there.
But how about us low life level people, here in Utah and Salt Lake City, where we're not talking major. We're in the broadcast arena where I live. I'm trying to figure out. Our primary customer is where we go on location and we do interviews with people, making them look good for TV network, whether it's 60 Minutes or Dateline or these, and I don't see that our business operation is going to be changed that way.
Right.
But we've seen some leaps and bounds improvements in what maybe B-roll opportunities where, again, we've seen some drone footage and some recreated things in a library or whatever that just amazingly have. Again, my crystal ball is also broken. The tea leaves are stirred up, but I can see where potentially in the 3 to 6 months, and again, this is April of 24. So you have to. I could see where someone who wanted a flyover shot of whatever could potentially, we could input that in our edit system and come up with it in post, more of an in post kind of thing. But in even the smaller films that are being done. Locally,
well, look at the difference here. Here's a parallel. So in the 90s and 2000s or whatever, you wanted an aerial, you had to rent a helicopter, get a mount, very expensive, do all that stuff, time consuming. I did a Major League Baseball commercial shot over Dodger Stadium at night with a helicopter, and we couldn't get the shot because of wind and various things. And I wanted to wait until we were shooting back over Dodger Stadium to where you could see the sunset. So we wanted that balance of light to be just perfect, and so you could see this nice.
Was that on 35?
Yeah.
And what would that have cost? Is that a $50,000-$80,000 kind of a thing, or
probably more? Probably 150.
And so today,
but now I'm not saying that that's an example to replace everything or whatever. But my point is, helicopters were expensive, mounting cameras and
still are,
and still are. Now, with the drone, it's an everyday thing, and it does. And there's a saying that we always: just because you have it doesn't mean you should use it. It's like using a crane. Just because you have it, not every shot's a crane shot. So, use it wisely and whatever. But it just eliminates the whole thing about like, oh, well, I need to fly over this river. Do it. You can do it now for very inexpensive. So that's kind of a parallel, I think, to the AI thing. Is it's a tool and it'll work in certain circumstances, but technology never goes back. I mean, look at the Industrial Revolution. Look at every advancement in history. It just keeps moving, and it always will. So to resist it is futile, and I think just being open to it, trying to find the right way through it, and will there be some jobs changed and differences? Yeah. I mean, I have a picture from Salt Lake of this horse and buggy repair place that was translating into a automobile repair place, and it showed a car up on this ramp going up to the upper level, I guess, where they maybe worked on cars and they worked on the horse and buggies downstairs or something. I don't know. But I thought of that as like, well, here, there are people out there protesting in the street, get these cars out of here, But this was obviously a company that was saying, hey, if it's a buggy, we'll fix it. Right. If it's an automobile, we'll fix it.
It's probably Studebaker.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is that you can resist it, or you can just embrace it and figure out where it's going to go, and stay ahead of it and find if your job might be affected by it, then figure out a way to, utilize that, find a new angle on that job. There's always something else that comes out of it. I think there is a little bit of a scare about it. I think this whole like, oh, AI is going to replace everybody and everything. I think that's a little over the top. But with all new technology comes fear. Yeah. There's a fear of like what it could possibly do, and sure, could be destructive. There's anything we do, we see the cell phone, the destructiveness of too much of all these variety of too much information. Everybody's got a voice. There's too much happening. It's largely because of this thing, So we have to moderate that within our own lives. Use it to, whatever you need it to be. And some people are going to get addicted to it and go too far, and others won't. So I don't think there's any straight answer to it.
Do we have then?
But what's your take on it, the AI?
Well, again, for our industry, it will be more of a post-production kind of thing. We'll still, you know, it's still about telling a story. That's the bottom line. Everything we do is telling a story with a beginning, middle, and an end using wide, medium, close-up shots that ideally, I always like to think of being able to produce a video or film with so visually, if you don't even hear the audio, you know what's going on. And then your audio should enhance. It should be like a radio program with all of those elements, and you put them together, it's a marriage, and you have this sort of great product, which, you know, I think a lot of people don't achieve that because they think it's, you know, it's better with one or the other, or it needs to be colorized. But again, moving forward with the next generation, you know, what do we tell the next generation about from our experiences and, you know, looking forward in terms of getting a job, you know, keeping a job? Do they, you know, everyone wants to, again, be a director, it seems like, but it seems like there's some opportunities for the next generation to potentially, you know, be more, they're more computer literate anyway.
Yeah, they came here with a whole, you know, technology was part of their lives from the beginning. So of course it's going to be different. And look at the difference in movies from, you know, the early 1900s to now. I mean, while you can still look at a Buster Keaton movie or whatever and be highly entertained. So you know, it's subjective as far as what is the technology doing for us, but then if you look at Dune, let's jump right to 2024. I mean, you couldn't do that back then. I mean, so the level of the technology always brings those new opportunities to tell different kinds of stories. So I think it'll change. What stories will end up being told with different technologies is, I think, yet to, you know, it's a constantly evolving thing, which we will figure out along the way, you know.
Plus, there is that whole audience that, I mean, it's being debated now whether TikTok is going to be around, but there's a huge audience that is doing that TikTok routine, you know, the verticals. And that's where we are seeing a lot of the deep fakes or whatever, you know. And we'll probably see that. That'll probably be the first tranche of, you know, manipulated videos that will.
Yeah. But it's like in my, you know, YouTube watching or whatever, I like documentaries, I like informational, so all that stuff just a touch away. I can search, find any, and then it brings up things about like, oh, do you want to watch how, you know, whatever you're into, maybe steam engines or something. I don't know.
I like steam engines.
Yeah, but I mean, but that stuff is instantly available.
Yeah.
What if you wanted to watch a show on steam engines on, you know, A&E or some cable? Oh, okay, how do I find that? You know, I mean, maybe there's something out there, but if they're not currently.
Are you being paid by YouTube to
kind of
promote?
No, but I should be. No. But I'm just saying it's a tool. You know, it allows me to have a lot of informational product that I can find at an instant that I spend a lot of time watching because I like learning about it. So if I want to know about any of these technologies, I can figure it out. I want to know about any camera or any changes or anything. I can figure it out. And so I do spend a lot of time that way. And I watch, you know, entertainment type stuff, podcasts and different things as well. But when I go to a movie, I want to go to the theater, or, you know, I'll watch stuff on streaming that's only on Netflix or something. I'll watch it at home on on my bigger screen. They're all, you know, good. But this device gives me one different level that doesn't exist, when you had 500 channels on a okay, you sit there and scroll through. Do I want to watch this? Do I want to watch that? This, I can instantly just find what I want. And I think that becomes more of a thing. Now, is all the quality always there or whatever? There's a lot of good content creators that are, you know, their game's really high. And then there's other things, you know, some guy in his workshop showing you how to rebuild a tube amplifier from the 60s or whatever, and it's crappy video and whatever, but nobody cares because you want to know how to rebuild that tube amplifier. So it's it's wildly different, you know, and all of it works on some level and TikTok works. you know, for
So are you addressing the YouTubers that are people creating for YouTube?
yeah, I mean, in a sense, I think it's totally viable.
I mean, it's still filmmaking or still
yeah,
telling
for sure.
stories with a beginning, middle, and end, or with a
They
process or
yeah,
explainer videos.
and as when you really figure out that they're doing these things once a week or whatever, we all know. You shoot and you gather your content. You got to sit there and look at it all. You got to decide how to put it together. You got to decide how to mix it, how to do your audio, how to do music, how to do graphics, how to do all this stuff. Not easy stuff, you know. And they all, I mean, sure, there's some people out there that are doing, you know, hey, here's the new iPad, and they're shooting it on an iPhone, and it's very minimal color correcting and it's basic editing. So there is different levels of it for sure, but there's a lot of people on there that are higher production value and takes a lot of work, and
And they're monetizing it. They're making money on
yeah.
it. That
so it's totally viable.
Yeah.
I don't look down my nose at anything. I mean, you know, it's all whatever you want to do. If I could figure out, you know, if I were good on camera, which I don't think I necessarily am, and I could do something that I could figure out a way to make money doing it, what's the difference in that versus getting hired to shoot a commercial? I don't see it, as long as I get to use my skills and do what I do, right? So it's all viable, and this opportunity has opened up a whole level that nobody ever thought would exist.
right.
So that tells you that there's going to be other levels that will open up. It never stops changing, so there'll be something else, you know. That's the trick. What's after this, you know, YouTube and whatever, who knows?
What are the opportunities in terms of, you know, film production? Does it need to be in LA? Can it be? I mean, you know, they're making films all over the world.
Right.
But where's the future? I mean, can we be here in Utah and make a living?
Yeah, I think.
Or do you need to be a union person? Do you need to be where the movies are being made in Georgia, or, you know?
Well, again, I think it's what level of job you're trying to do. I am in the union, and you know, so I generally work on projects that are based out of LA. So, and yeah, I think I always planned on going back, and then I never did. So I think it would have been an advantage to be there, you know, just because you can interact and you learn, you develop relationships with different types of people. But there's so much variety out there. There's so much production happening all over.
But you've had a challenge getting work in Utah. I mean, your phone number is from where?
Yeah, from LA.
Yeah, why?
I think there was a perception in the 2000s that, you know, more so that you had to be in LA. And there's still a little bit of a bias. It's like, oh, you're not from LA, so you couldn't know what maybe other people know. But that's just you know, how society and we categorize people and say, well, you couldn't know the same thing because you're in Utah or whatever, which I don't believe in at all.
Well, but some people are told if you want to be successful in the film industry, it's not here, it's in LA. You need to go to LA. Is that not true?
It's hard to say exactly that that's true or false. I think it's where, look at what I described about my history of working on projects. If you want to work on features or TV series, you've got to be in an area where you can do that. So that may be here, because it is here at a lot of times, and then
things have shifted from LA
it
to
could be Atlanta. It could be,
or
you know,
Canada.
it's always been in you know, Vancouver, and
so I don't know what percent is still in LA versus, you know, where it's shifted around for these tax benefits that you're.
And that's a good point. Now it's based on incentives. So it's like wherever they can get the money is where they're going. It doesn't matter, because in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, I think, you know, there weren't as many crews experienced in these other areas. So when they went in the 40s and 50s, they took everybody to some remote location. They took everybody to southern Utah to shoot a John Ford movie. I mean, you might have hired some wranglers from local, whatever, but now you could go to any city and find local grips, electricians, camera assistants, makeup, hair, wardrobe, transportation. All those departments now exist in most locations, so they don't have to bring everybody. In fact, the incentives encourage that you use as many people from those local areas as possible. You get more of a refund on your tax.
In light of the actors and writers strike that just happened, do you see if people have kind of fled the industry who couldn't wait around for 6 or 9 months, that when we start up, which is, we're just starting to reemerge from that, I see kind of a vacuum, a lack of potentially qualified people who couldn't wait and, kind of.
Okay, so this brings up a good point that we talked about prior to starting today. I've always kind of made a reference to the film industry is kind of like the circus in a way. I mean, it's you get on that train, you go to this next city, you don't know when you're coming back, you don't know how long you're going to be out there, you don't know anything, and it's still kind of the same. So I just don't know where. And speaking of trains, I just lost my train of thought, so we're going to have to.
Well, qualified people.
Let's go back.
Are we going to have enough qualified people, coming out of the pandemic and coming out of these actors, writers strikes, the economic downturn where, we're April 2024, slowly moving forward at glacial speed, it seems like. Are there going to be enough people trained, and or how are those people? I see a deficit of qualified people, but maybe it's an opportunity for this next generation. I don't know. You still need to be highly qualified to work on a movie set.
Yeah. I think it's always the same. I still think you need the qualified people. I think you still need to get the experience. Did this last strike and these years eliminate some people? Most likely, yes. And it's always been a tough industry. It's an industry where you don't know where the next job is. You don't know what the next economic thing is. You don't know any variation on the many factors that create the industry.
We've both gone through those ups and downs where it's gloom and doom, and then things take off again.
It's always done that. It's always cycled. So you can only assume, based on the model of that that cycle will continue.
Are we optimistic?
Yeah. I mean, it'll change. It'll be different. And the more experienced you are and adaptable you are, probably the better you'll respond to that. And if hopefully your lifestyle has set you up. Now, I understand if you're starting out, you may not be able to weather that storm because you don't have, the financial savings to maybe get through that or do whatever. It's a harder thing, and people may look at it and because I've had many people in the course of my time say, I just couldn't know that I wasn't getting paid every 2 weeks. So you may not have the personality for this industry.
That's true. It is a change. Having gone from working at a TV station and a regular paycheck and working 40 hours a week, and then you're doing 30 hours or you're doing 80 hours, or it's kind of a crazy time that you have to adapt to.
And it's kind of always been that way, and it's maybe more so now with whatever, and it's always weeded the people out. I've always had an analogy of skiing, you go up there, it's cold, those boots hurt, you fall down, you get beat up, it's expensive.
Then don't go.
Exactly. So it weeds those people out. Because if it was easy,
everybody,
there'd be 5 million more people up there. So, you got to fight through it a little bit. You got to endure the boots that hurt and the cold, and you got whatever. But when that kicks in and when it starts being fun, and you find the right boots and skis, and it all works, it's fun, and you have a good time. So.
But also recently we've seen again in the 2024 we've seen people selling off their equipment locally, especially, and where they bought brand new stuff. So more and more people seem to be leaving or going out of business. I don't know where they're going, I don't know how encouraging we can be moving forward. Again, we've seen those ups and downs.
Well, and again, it's the model of the freelancer, it's the model of the artist or whatever. You can't burden yourself with a lot of debt. You don't go out and buy a $335,000 set of Canon K35 lenses because they're the coolest thing out there. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you have that kind of investment and the work isn't coming in, then you're going to have the loans and the, the financial, responsibility and the debt. So it's a
I think we both see, however, that the pipeline, at this time, it's empty. The episodic hasn't been, it's not being worked on. And so I think we both see a bright future in the near future because we need to crank up some productions and get things going. So I think we both are optimistic in terms of...
Yeah, I think so. I just think it's weathering the storm. It will weed out the faint of heart. It's not an easy industry. It never has been, never will be. There's a lot of pressure to have the next technology or the next gear or whatever. And I'm kind of a little tired of it relying so much on, I've got all this gear,
Right.
so whatever. If I were looking to do something and I needed to hire the people, I would want to find the people that worked creatively and produced the results, and all the cameras work, all the lighting, all this LED stuff. I just went to an LED, well, not an LED seminar, but a little setup where new products are being presented, and one of the new products that's out there, and I'm drawing a blank a little bit on the model number of it, but whatever it was, it's now, because they were saying it's equivalent to maybe a 10K tungsten unit. And, we set it up side by side with a 10K tungsten unit, and we looked at it and read it with meters and checked it, and it was within a half a stop of a 10K, and it's not that expensive. And can it spot in all the way that a 10K Fresnel can with the dynamics of a bulb in a Fresnel? No, this 10K focused tighter and did whatever, but that, how many times do you need a fully spotted 10K or whatever? So again, it's a tool, it's changing, becoming more affordable, and the other big thing was that this light worked at the same level at a 10. You'd have to have a generator, and you'd have to have that. This light had a variable switch for amperage, so you could work it on 20 amps and get the full amount, so you get that half stop back. So then it was equal to a 10K. But on 15 amps, which you can use on a household circuit, it was a half stop difference. You could use it, and plus it's bicolor. So no 10K is bicolor. So again, all the variety of technology. That light would have been a godsend 15, 20 years ago. Being able to use it in a household situation without a generator. So there's all these advances that always happen that brings the technology, forward, cheaper, more technology, more advantage,
So let's talk just briefly about the expectations of people, getting into the business. It seems like there's people haven't been coached on what to expect. I have found that people will approach White Rabbit Productions looking for a job, and they've gone through and gotten their training, they've gone to college, although they've never ever been to a TV station, or they've never been on a production, they've never been on a movie set, and they have this unrealistic expectation that they can get a job that pays $45,000 and has or more and has all kinds of benefits and health, and it's whether that's the institute that has sort of mistrained them. I think there's some promises that are obviously being made.
Yep.
But I mean, the reality is, it is difficult. You can't.
Well, I think you can't ever have enough mentorship. And if you're not willing to do that, if you run out and spend a lot of money on gear and expect to be at a certain level without that experience and that time and that mentorship, I don't know how, it's like learning to play the piano or the guitar. I mean, you've got to spend a lot of time doing it to be good. That 10,000 hours thing. You don't expect to just buy the guitar and the piano and be an expert.
Yeah. Is that the problem of the college or university or wherever you're getting your information? Where I've always felt that when you go to a university or college in a film program, the expectation should be that you leave with real material, or a demo reel or something that you can show someone that you can do something. Where I don't think that happens.
I think that's an unrealistic expectation, although what you're spending these days, in the 80s didn't cost me that much to go to UCLA. It was a state school, so university system school, so the tuition wasn't high. Now it's very high, even UCLA, and very difficult to get into, and you're going to spend a lot of money to do that. It's so you've got to manage those expectations of what you're going for, what industry you're after. If you're doing corporate video, you probably could go through a different program and learn, and have less experience and learn through the process and come out with the experience to do that. If it's a TV series, feature film level, it's going to still require more mentorship, more experience, more training, more time out there. I don't know that there's any magic thing to. You're not going to go out there and buy gear and turn into this acclaimed filmmaker.
Not everyone's a Spielberg. What I see online, when people are asking, what should I do? How do I get the experience? I can't get a job, it's a catch-22. I don't have the experience. How do you get it? You have to be on a set or something. And people will say, you just need to go shoot. You just need to go write your own stuff and shoot, which,
and I think that's viable for certain types of people.
But
not
the
everybody.
better reality is, if you're learning from people who have this limited amount of experience, who are willing to have you tag along, you're not going to gain that higher level of quality experience like that you and I have both experienced. You should perhaps either do it for free or try to get a full-time job, like you did the television news. That's not what you wanted to do, but it allowed you to go shoot something every day and look at it and get the experience level. So I think when people say you just need to go on your own and shoot and write because that's how you get the experience, is not really a valid way of getting into the industry.
It's complicated these days because this iPhone 15 Pro Max can create imagery on a high level. It is viable to shoot with for certain types of applications.
Actually, certain TV news, smaller news operations are shooting and editing. That's the only tool they have is their phone now.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to shoot right now some B-roll of us on the, no, just kidding. But it's usable. I mean, I investigated, as you remember, a couple of months back with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, with buying the rig, with now that you can shoot on ProRes and you can record to a hard drive and off camera, and the audio gets better and you can figure all that stuff out. Yeah, it's viable. I mean, it's just, again, the tool for the job. Is it right for everything? No, but it could be for certain jobs and applications. And it does work. A lot of the YouTube stuff that I watch is just shot on an iPhone. Or you can see on podcasts when you see wide shots that they're on DSLRs, still, or whatever. It really doesn't matter. I think focusing on the content, your experience, the creativity, These are tools, and it can work, but it can also give somebody, you don't have to go out and spend crazy money to experiment. You can shoot some things on this and get results, test, shoot different types of things, edit things together, learn, experience. So the levels of experience and variety are widely great. They're everywhere, and it's just up to, like any profession, it's going to take time to dig through the stuff, figure out what's real, figure out what works, figure out the level of the projects you want to work on, and what the technology can be for those types of levels. It's just the process.
One of the deficits I see in some of the produced videos that people are showing on their demo reels is they are using some higher technology, and they say, well, because of this camera, it's a low light camera. I don't even need to really put any light on it, which I think is obviously a big misnomer. You and I both know that, but I've seen a disturbing trend where people literally are not lighting, or they're going for that sort of dark, whether it's a noir kind of thing, it's just dark. And recently I saw a video that someone said, give me some feedback on this, and it was just like 3 stops too dark, and I couldn't see what was going on. It wasn't there was no context. We've watched Masters of the Air, where there are scenes about World War II, but they're in a concentration camp, and there's a light bulb, and you expect that to be dark. But some people are filming some scenes with, I don't know, dancing, or I don't know what's going on because I can't see it. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people are making is they're either not lighting, or they're not using enough light. Or it's something they haven't learned because they.
Well, let me go back to the HBO camera test example, which we didn't talk about the film part of that. So 400 ISO across the board for an Alexa, a Red, a Sony, a Canon, whatever. Don't be mad at me if I didn't mention your preferred
That's okay. No,
platform,
that's fine.
because there's a million out there. But everything.
But 400 isn't really
Or
super
800, I think it was 800.
Okay, all right, that's all right.
Okay, so 800 across the board,
Right.
800 ISO for all these varieties of situations. The film fell down in those situations. It did not, because film isn't equal to, now if you were, so this project I'm going to do in the fall, it was even brought up, should we do this on film? Well, the budget isn't film friendly. I'm going to, and there's a lot of locations, and it's a lot of night stuff. Film at night takes more crew, more lighting, more budget. So it isn't fully equal, even though it's equal in the look. There's many projects that were shot this year on film that look great. And some even are doing the nights, like on Killers of the Flower Moon. They shot digital on a lot of the night stuff just because of the availability of available light or less lighting, or the ability to not have as much gear and whatever, even though it was a very
And anymore, that's
expensive film.
the film video matches. It's seamless.
But so they are choosing, and I would do it too. I would shoot, and I did it on a project where I shot mostly on film, but the night stuff on a water tank in London at night with all these different elements. I shot it on an Alexa. I shot that piece. I said, here's a situation based on a lot of experience that I have and understanding of the situation. Here's a situation where we're at night. We've got 4 nights to do this scene. It's a water tank. It's at night. There's elements of smoke and environmental things and water splat, and so there's so many varieties of things. And we're on a stabilized head on a techno crane. are we willing to shoot film for 4 days and not know those results and not see the ability to get in there and say, hey, did that piece really work? Do you need that, playback to be able to look at that?
That would be a little dodgy in my
Yeah.
mind, but
So there are, again, times when I would say, even though I love film, like this movie I'm doing, we don't have the budget for it. I don't have the low light. My Alexa 35 is going to allow me to shoot at lower light levels with less gear and less crew. It's going to give me, and again, I have a lot of experience. So I've done things where the budgets are large and I have the capability of having the technology and the crew and the things that I need to do. But what it also gives me, that experience, is to know the difference. This film is a lower budget film. It's going to be shot partially in Europe and partially in Montreal. It's going to be largely at night, like I said. My son John and I just went out the other night and did some tests. We got in his truck. He drove. I got a little tube light, LED. We got driving sequence, footage outside with ambient light in the background, cities out the window, because I wanted to show the director, like, this is one or two little tube lights, one for a little bit of fill, a little bit of source light, and one for a little bit of fill, and then balancing that at lower light levels to an ambient background of a city. I don't need a lot of light, So we wanted to show this test.
is it something we can show on this tape that we're doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we could.
Cool.
I shot it on the Canon C500 Mark II, and we shot it at pre-sunset, sunset, and then night. We wanted to be able to, look at varieties of things. I did a test 7-8 years ago when this dual ISO concept was just starting out with, a high ISO camera versus 800 versus 4000, or, as a base ISO. And it's right for certain things again. I shot, there's something on my phone that I could also show you that's insane that I shot.
Well, there's no insanity on this program.
No, but we went to the desert to just get out of town, and this shot here, which we can show on screen, and I'll show you, and we'll show everybody else.
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
It looks like a fire in the desert.
It's a campfire. There's no camp.
Right,
There's
right.
no fire in the campfire.
With a blue sky, and you've got some pixels missing, but
No, those would be stars.
you're kidding.
This is the middle of the night
You're
on
kidding.
the iPhone 15
Wow.
Pro Max.
That's amazing.
That's available light.
Yeah, that looks like the day for night kind of a thing you'd get, or
And you can put it up on
yeah,
the thing.
yeah.
But
That's amazing.
that's, yeah,
I thought those were missing pixels.
I know. No, I think it's Starlink, actually, a series of
Oh,
satellites
wow.
up there, or
That
stars, or whatever.
That's amazing. Is it the Milky Way then? No, those are clouds, but wow, that's amazing.
No, but that's
I
2
know.
a.m. I woke up. It was a full moon by just chance. I had to pee, so I got out, and
I need to get this. This might be my next camera. I don't know.
well, it works on, again, for certain things. But if you look and you zoom in, you squeeze in, look at the level of
I
detail
know,
on the
I
mountain
know.
back there
That's got shadows on it.
with
even.
moonlight.
Right.
So
that's amazing.
yeah, you can do some crazy things
Yeah.
nowadays.
And we have seen some movies that have been done on iPhones, you know,
Yeah.
the entire production. So it's, in terms of.
Well, and I built a rig to test the iPhone 15 with the, off recording off onto a hard drive with ProRes, and
So that's
there's
viable for
Yeah.
somebody starting out to be able to, again, tell a story.
Yeah.
It doesn't have all the lens selections and the
Right.
depth of field and whatnot, but it's a
But again,
viable way of.
if you're experienced and have the know-how and the technology, I can put on extra lenses on it. I can maximize that. I could use that in conjunction. I could use this as just like, again, do I need to hire a helicopter to shoot aerials? No, I can get a drone now and do things. Do I need always for some B-roll or something? I could do some of this, or it could be a third camera angle.
In a way, it's good that you have something like that. It is a tool. I mean, my very first camera then in film class was I think it was a Kodak Super 8 millimeter, and it had, the only thing it would do is it had a battery, so when you squoze the trigger, it would run. But it was a fixed lens. You had to set the exposure. If you wanted to get closer, you had to get in a wheelchair or something and do that sort of zoom, which really made you inventive. And it really, again, because you're shooting a 2 minutes and 45-second cassette, you think about everything before you squeeze the trigger.
Well, look at that. Look at the level of the quality of the imagery for $1,200 for
No, that's amazing.
an iPhone 15 Pro Max.
You can make phone calls with it.
And I can text you. Versus, what was that price?
That was cheaper. That was 53,000.
53,
Yeah.
but no lens, so still no lens, no tripod, no
Right.
whatever. The stabilized video capabilities it's just getting to a point where,
I'm going to start crying.
but
I know.
technology
It's amazing.
is just,
So on this podcast, we've talked about our histories, our combined histories, the different cameras and how they've progressed. We've touched on some history, working in the industry, how to get a job, what we think AI may or may not do and have as an effect on our respective jobs. But if you have any other questions that we haven't addressed, feel free to call this number, 1-800. But let us know. Give us some feedback, and we'll try to,
WhiteRabbitProductions.com or
through our combined
WilliamsDP.com.
decades of experience, we'll try to address any questions you might have.